Hello, Unbreakable Mompreneurs. Have you thought, I don't know how to eat? For me, I just found out I'm pre-diabetic, right? So it's like diet is everything and what you put in your mouth and how that affects us. And so today I have a special guest in the house. It's Whitney Isola, and she is going to talk to us about nutrition and healthcare and different things that she does. And so my name is Charisse Walker, your host. And without further ado, Whitney, why don't you introduce yourself to us?
Okay, thank you, Charisse. What a kind intro. So hi everyone, my name is Whitney Isola. I am a registered dietitian and also an entrepreneur. I've worked in the nutrition space for 15 plus years now and have worked in different types of practice settings from multidisciplinary medical practices to community hospitals to major systems. So can definitely speak to my nutrition experience there. I also launched a digital health company that focused on building a supportive cancer care platform for patients, and I'm currently working in a role with a company called Archer Review. We are a medical and healthcare education technology company, and we are growing at a completely rapid clip, and I've kind of been there from the ground floor, so I can sort of speak to some of that growth trajectory. So yeah, excited to be here today and talking to fellow moms about all the fun business things.
Well, and add to that, you just have a newborn. So as if you're not busy enough, you're getting home on top of that as well. So that's
Yeah, yeah, no, that's true. I just had my second 2.5 months ago, so it's definitely fun. Although I will admit, this time I like needed to get back in the mental groove of working again way faster than with number one.
it's hard, isn't it?
Yeah, no, certainly. I mean, it was just it's kind of interesting, right? The first time around, you just so much of a learning curve, and like that time at home is so special. At least for me this time, there was kind of other ways for me to fill my cup mentally, and so I just felt like I wanted to make sure that I had a little bit more of that a little bit sooner. So I actually went back to work on the earlier side this time.
And I know there's a lot of moms listening that it's probably not even a choice. I remember that I could
Yeah.
it's like 4 weeks or 8 weeks in short-term or long-term disability. And the one I had to go back very quickly. Not that I wanted to, but I had to. And other times it's like I'm taking the full, I guess it's 3 months, right? 6 weeks or 12 weeks. And it's changed, but
Well, yeah. Well, 12 weeks is for the job protection, but it's totally dependent on the employer what the actual financial coverage or consideration is. So for me, the first time around, I was with a company where I got 0 days of maternity leave, but I had short-term disability and I had a whole ton of sick time banked up and whatnot. And so I ended up taking about 4 months. And this time around was the opposite. I had the like guaranteed coverage of 5 weeks full pay, and I ended up taking about six-ish in terms of starting to phase back into work. But you're right, I feel very fortunate that I got to kind of make that choice myself. And I did have short-term disability and other types of things that I could have really pieced together to turn that into 3, 4, 5 months had I chosen to.
yeah, and I don't think that's something, and we're not going to touch on this very long. I have a guy that, and he's a client of mine. He got 10 months. And then his wife,
Oh,
he goes back to work and she gets pregnant during that time again because he's home. And so it's like 5 months later, he has another baby. And so he gets another 10 months. And this company is amazing. So I think for the moms that are looking at a job, but are also have their W-2s, like if those things are important to you, it's important to consider. I mean, that's a big thing, a big bonus that sometimes not everybody has. So let's switch gears. So, what is the future of tech in healthcare?
ooh, what an interesting question. So, I mean, the way that we're trying to really use technology in terms of informing our own company and learning is that we want to use it to, number one, enhance access, right? Like there's a lot of learning that can happen in the healthcare field, all the way from, students that don't know if they're ready to get into healthcare yet or not, to continuing education or upskilling professionals through additional certifications and more advanced practice degrees. So what we've tried to really do is be intentional about building coursework, curricula work, and or test prep education tools that are not only, more competitively priced than what is already out there, but are also just more intuitive for the learner. So like really helping to use things like machine learning and training data to say, okay, well, your weaknesses are in this area and this area. And if you can improve your scores by 15 percentage points here, you'll actually bring your total score up into a passing range. So I think we're thinking about it from a detailed analytics and remediation standpoint that really help learners focus in on what they want to make it less overwhelming to get into various healthcare fields. So I think there's a lot of, I know I'm kind of answering it with the lens of my experience and my company, but I think that with the trends that are happening in technology and healthcare, we kind of had that first bastion of EMRs, and there was too much documentation, like the admin barrier that kind of came at healthcare. If you didn't document it, it didn't happen, right? Was sort of the first pendulum swing, and now as much as possible, they're trying to create infrastructure and automations for how things get tracked and coded into the healthcare experience, but in a way that's a little bit more intuitive and less burdensome for those providers. And I think that the next sort of chapter is really going to be around using the information at hand, create more intelligent user experiences that are designed around the end consumer in healthcare. I think that a lot of how it exists today, the technology is much more positioned for the providers than the people consuming healthcare. And so I think what we're starting to see is that the companies that really relentlessly focus on the customer are gaining some traction. And I think there's also a lot of really interesting and exciting uses of AI and machine learning and training data that are coming at us fast and furious.
Yeah, that's a lot.
Sorry.
I no, it's fine. You're passionate. I think that's good. But it's interesting because you talk about technology and you talk like today, I'm building a team or I have built a team, right? And the way I did it 5 years ago or even 10 years ago is different than I do it today. And with AI, I guess there's this program where they're like, oh, you need standard SOPs, standard operating procedures. Then, okay, well, while you're doing the task, we can monitor what you're doing and write the tasks for you step by step. I'm like, genius.
Yeah,
And
yeah,
so
yeah.
when you talk about how if it wasn't documented, it didn't happen, I mean, those
Yeah.
things are almost because of AI, all these different things that you can do. Like even the Zoom call, I can create this AI and it says, catch me up, or do these different things, or come up with titles. Like there's so much that we almost don't have to think a lot about, obviously, procedures and how to do those things, but it's becoming a lot easier for us, I think.
Right, right. And I mean, isn't removing that mental load
Yeah,
helpful, right? Like, yeah, your brain space is better spent elsewhere.
exactly. So
Yeah.
rarely do I get to talk to somebody who actually, because are you managing a team?
Yes.
Okay. And so that perspective that it's not necessarily your company, but you're in charge of a whole team of people. So this is exciting for me just because we get a different perspective sometimes. And so
Yeah.
when you're balancing that team, what are some things that you've learned in order to get them to be motivated to come to work and to actually be productive in their job?
Number one, I think it's really important to build personal rapport with the people that you're working with. just understanding a little bit about somebody goes a really long way when you have to have conversations, around something like a project that's actively going on. I think just that little bit of rapport makes a huge difference. Number two, I think like really just trying to learn what lights people up and how you can sort of try to delegate things their way that either challenge them in a good way that help them grow, and like support them through that. But I think that oftentimes people are kind of hungrier for more than you realize. And so respecting that autonomy and not passing down lower hanging fruit is important in terms of building that rapport with somebody and building that sort of mutual trust. And then I do think about it from the perspective of like, what do you want to be working on that is really exciting to you? Obviously, work is work, right? There's always going to be that 20% of a job that's a little bit more tedious, or, oh, I have to work on this project. All right. Yes, we all have that. However, if you could really be getting people like interested and engaged for the majority of their work life, you're going to get better work out of them. You're going to get fresh ideas. You're going to get honest perspective. I feel very lucky because we've built a work culture that is really rooted in cheerleading and it's also rooted in transparency. And I think between the two, it's built a healthy amount of here's what's going on, here's where I'm helping. Let's be super proud of this person right next to me. Right? There's so much good work to be done. It's easy to cheerlead the people next to you when you feel like you're working on interesting projects as well. Um, and then at the same time, it's not a negative to say, here's where we are in the process, here's where we're going, here's what's holding us up, or what do you think? What's your perspective? Because there's so many times that like getting some additional thoughts early on really help inform how we might be building a new product or tackling how we're going to be marketing a new product or things like that.
That's great. So think of when you first started and you in the industry, where you were and new, hungry to where you are now, still hungry, I can tell. Um, what is something you wish you would have known back then that you know now?
Oh gosh, what a good question. I mean, I think that I think that like realizing how important it is to just ask questions and like it's very okay to not be the expert. I think when I first started out, I very much thought that the working world was like a whole bunch of people that knew a lot better.
Mhm.
And the great like irony of it all is none of us do, right? And so you're just making the best decisions that you can in the moment with the information that you have. And so I mean, I'm kind of a curious by nature. I don't need to be the person that knows everything in the room. So I think like honing those skills for what questions to ask or how you think about a problem is an important skill set that actually like is a soft skill set that goes a lot longer than I think people realize. Or maybe they think of it as like a weakness because you're showing that you don't know something. But I've actually found the opposite to be true in my career, is that it's important to be asking some of those questions.
Mhm. No, that's really good advice. Okay, and before we started, you had mentioned that yes, you have your W-2, but you also have a business on the side. And what prompted you to decide to open up that company?
Yeah, so I mean, I'm not even sure it qualifies as a company. I mean, obviously for the IRS it does, but I have an LLC, just a very basic website that exists for it. That's like an intake form. But in my experience with launching the first digital health company that I was a part of, I just was very energized by the entire ecosystem in terms of startups and learning about angel investing and pre-seed, Series A, like all of the different rounds. What is the funding environment like with venture capital, et cetera. But it's learnings that happen as long as you're being proactive and going to a lot of different sources. And so I launched the LLC so that I could have a vehicle to help early teams in terms of helping. I feel like I've now been through helping early companies, quite a few early companies, do a lot of random things. And so if I can be a conduit to helping people get some answers more quickly, I would like to be. That said, I honestly don't really like market myself as that. I have it so that I have this little vehicle for any kind of consulting work, or speaking work that comes that makes sense to kind of like funnel through that LLC. But in terms of my work life, I kind of, let that sit on the back burner. And if something comes up that makes sense, then sure. But it's not something that I kind of pursue a lot of projects
Right.
with. Yeah. So
And it's hard because when you're managing a team and you're working a full-time W-2 job, the hours, it's a lot of time.
yeah.
So
Yeah.
and put
Yeah.
your mind.
So it lives there, but it's not, yeah, it's not the main event.
And
Uh,
I have to ask though, because you're a dietitian.
yeah.
So what is your recommendation to moms? Because it's hard. And dinner time, I detest. Like if I could hire a professional or a personal chef or cook to just make dinner for me every night, or at least tell me what to make. So what is
Yeah.
your advice to moms?
Yeah. I mean, it's such a broad question. This is the tricky part about nutrition is like you really have to think through what things make sense for your life,
Mhm.
but I'll try to sort of rattle through like a number of things that may or may not be helpful. It is so hard in terms of working full time and then you go and have like dinner time and then that's just the start of evening and bedtime and whatever. So, number one, specifically for moms, and I just speak from personal experience, like getting my son involved in like being my sous chef,
Mhm.
not every night, right? Because sometimes that's more annoying.
Right.
But he's 3, he has a little like safe cutting set, and I'll just give him a cucumber and he goes to town with the little shapes and with cutting and he has like a little peeler and what I find is he's kind of he feels important. He's hanging out with me in the kitchen while I'm cooking. Um, B, it's very tactile with food. It makes like him really engaged in the idea of like being part of the meal process. Um, and C, like he doesn't realize it, but he's eating like 2 servings of vegetables before he even ever sits down at the table where he's just gonna have his pasta like, 80% of the time. Let's call a spade a spade. And so like, with making it almost like play based, he's like getting good stuff.
Yep.
Um, so I think that's one strategy. Yeah, I mean, in terms of nutrition and approaching meal planning and whatnot, it kind of depends on your own personality and time and resources. Like there are months and years where I like batch cooking a little bit more. There are months and years where I like just buying only really what I need for a couple of nights of meals and getting right back to the grocery a few days later. Like sometimes it's not the most practical, but I'm at least enjoying my meal prep a little bit more day in, day out. There are apps, or you could even, I mean, quite frankly, go ask ChatGPT. Say, with everything in terms of those large language models, everything comes down to the prompting. Say, I want you to design a meal plan for me for the week. I want 5 dinners and 5 lunches. I want them to follow like broad nutrition standards. I want them to be healthy. I want blank servings of vegetables. I want you to make me a corresponding grocery list. I want some of those,
Hmm.
those ingredients to overlap across the week. Like I want it to be vegetarian. I want it to prioritize like fish, So I think also just like being open to playing around with those types of things, that helps, right? And then I will say, as an RD in practice, I don't think I've ever had one client ever in my life that actually just went home and followed the meal plan. People love the idea of getting the meal plan. Like that is like, oh, if I just had a meal plan.
Right.
And it's like not actually true, right? Because you read it and you're like, oh, but I don't have this one ingredient. So of course, it sort of falls by the wayside in terms of human nature. So I'm a big fan of and this is where kind of the individualized counseling and support comes in, but like really just trying to identify one thing a week where you can make a meaningful change, but keep it, right? Sometimes that's using the dessert fork instead of the dinner fork as what you're eating meals with. Sometimes it's using smaller plates. Sometimes it's drinking a glass of water before you sit down to a meal because the brain it doesn't differentiate between hunger and thirst very well. I always sort of phrase it that you can't even begin to be in touch with your hunger and fullness cues if you're not properly hydrated. So all of those types of little levers, they really add up. Chewing one's food, like yeah. So anyways, I don't know if that if
No, that's really
my
good.
many directions of tangent there helped at all, but
No, it's good because I think everyone's different. My mom, she growing up, it's you have to chew your food 20 times before you swallow. When I was directing colleges, I never had time. People were lined up outside my door constantly. And so if I got 2 minutes, then I was going to scarf that food down as fast as I could because the next person's coming in. So I've learned to eat fast. And she comes to visit and she's still chewing her food, 20 times each. And then I went to one of my clients' house to visit this weekend, and the cutest little girls are like 3 years old. And she kept going to the fridge and coming out with these little Ziploc bags full of carrots or string cheese. I'm like, do you just put those in bags for your kids? She's like, yeah, that way they can just grab it. I'm like, genius. All these little things that work for people. And
yeah.
it's good information that you gave. I'm totally chat GPT, which it's free, obviously,
Yeah.
if you have the free version. I don't, but yeah, there's so many different ways that we can use social media and technology now.
Right. Yeah. And I mean, at the very least, for like inspiration.
Yeah. Okay, so last question. And I know that
Yeah.
ones are little still, but I want you
Yeah.
to imagine yourself at the park with your children, and this 9 month pregnant woman comes, which wasn't too long ago for you. And first time mom, she sits down at the park bench. What is one piece of advice you wish you would have known in her shoes at that time?
Ooh, let me think for a second. Um, hmm. I mean, one piece of advice, well, I was going to say that I got, but I guess I would have had that in her shoes. Two things I'll say. Number one, it's like so cliche, but it is all so fleeting that it really is. So like to be able to hold on to
Mhm.
those moments, even when they're like the longest day of your life, um, is definitely meaningful. But one piece of advice that I had gotten that I think I actually like do think about this often enough just on my own that like somebody said to me, whenever you think you're like in the hardest part of it,
Mhm.
the next day it's gone. It's true. There's so many little moments where you're like, oh, this is the most awful parenting thing that I think I've been through.
Mhm.
And then all of a sudden it just kind of resolves or at least attenuates. And I don't know, I always think about that piece of advice because you feel like you're like hitting a wall with something and then all of a sudden it's not the biggest deal anymore.
Mhm.
And I have found that to be helpful and true in terms of
Yeah.
kids.
The whole adage, this too shall pass, and it always does, you know?
Yeah, yeah, yeah.
The You haven't got to the 8, 9, 10-year-old stage, so have fun with that. Or
No,
there's a scared eagle crying
no.
because you looked at him wrong. So
Yeah, no, that's fair. Yeah, I mean, I have two boys, and obviously one is a toddler and one is a lump. This is for sure our last kid, and in some ways, it's very mentally freeing to like know that because there are like some moments where it's like, oh, I just want to soak it. I know that this is it. Like, I'm just
yeah.
gonna try to soak it up. So,
It's amazing.
yeah.
And it's good that you like for me, I would be in the recovery room, no joke, and then I'd know, oh, there's a boy coming. And I'm like, seriously, I just had this one. And so when I got to that point where I'm like, okay, I don't feel like there's any more kids, I'm good. It is, you do want to just soak it in and enjoy it because it does before you blink, they're going to be 25 because that's what mine are, my oldest, and it's hard. Like my youngest is still super young, but still it.
Yeah.
Whitney, if our listeners wanted to find you, how would they do that?
Yeah. They should just find me on LinkedIn. My name is Whitney Isola, so Whitney, and last name Isola. You could also think Isola. Um, and yeah, find me on LinkedIn. My little vehicle of the LLC is Pair Partners. So you could find that. But again, it's not that meaningful. Come find me on LinkedIn. I'm always happy to have a conversation with people or just help provide support. And then our education tech company is called Archer Review, and we are growing rapid fire. So if people are in the healthcare, education, technology space, and want to have a conversation, come find me there.
And I do want to touch on that because I feel like we didn't touch on that very much. And
Sure.
then we're done. If I'm a business and I'm thinking like I have a need, what does your company do? Do they work with other companies or what?
So we largely sell to nursing students,
Okay.
medical students, healthcare professionals in terms of education products. So like a med school companion product, nursing school companion product, stuff to prepare people for their boards, for their different stage exams, and whatnot. We are expanding our advanced practice offerings. We are expanding our certifications, CEUs, continuing professional education sort of area. Right now, from a B2B standpoint, we partner with schools, universities in terms of being able to be their provider, and whether it's integrated with the curriculum or like the support product for their student body to pass their boards at the end of that education journey. But yeah, I mean, there's just a lot of good stuff happening.
Well, thank you. And thank you for coming on.
Yeah, thank you so much. This is lovely.
Yes, and Unbreakable Moms. We talked about a lot of stuff, but specifically how to build teams, how to manage your family as you're a new mom, or if you are in that space where you're looking for some products to help with the students that you teach, then reach out. Otherwise, go out and make it a great day. Beautiful moms, remember, you are unbreakable. Keep illuminating the world with your strength, pursuing your dreams, and reveling in the splendor of motherhood. This is Charisse Walker, bidding you farewell for now. Stay tuned for more empowering conversations on the next episode of the Unbreakable Mompreneurs podcast. Until then, keep shining bright. Signing off with love, Charisse Walker.